All right, well, we're here today with Brady, Kurt, and Dan, and we're going to talk about campuses and why we do campuses and why we think they're important. And my first question I was thinking about is, can you share a brief history of how multi-campus church movement began and its popularity?
Brady, I'll default to you.
I happen to serve at the Butler campus, if you're looking for kind of that context. It was early in the year 2017, I believe, that we had an idea of where would the next campus be. At the time, the Strip District had been, or I guess it was the Cultural District at that time. So we began some interest meetings, I would say early in 2017. And then October of 2017, we launched the Butler campus in a school in Butler. It was a Christian school, so it was set up, tear down. And I always remember those moments because we were in this parking lot that was unpaved. And whether it was it was not 90 degrees, but we had some minus 10 below degrees. We'd take all the sound equipment 75 yards with the team out of a storage unit into, we had some rocky...
Uphill both ways.
Uphill both ways. And so that was set up, tear down for about 6 months-ish. And then we shared some space at another church, so shared parking lot, our own worship center, but shared some space until COVID, that our current building came available in 2020, and then officially kind of launched in 2021 of Easter. So that's a little snippet of the Butler history.
Are you asking kind of the bigger question, like where did the whole idea even come from?
Where did it even,
Yeah, so certainly I think churches for generations just said, oh, church is a single building, and that was the way people thought about church. And in the 90s, there were a few churches that started to say, well, what if we had multiple locations, even in the same campus, in order to multiply capacity without always having to build a bigger worship center?
Right.
Because that had been part of it. And then there were some who said, well, if it works on one campus, can we go to another location down the road? And so in some ways it's church planting, but it's with the same rubric and governance and support of the broader, of a church that's already established, rather than just an autonomous church. And probably the real question that a lot of people ask is, well, then why not just church plant? If you're going to do multi-site, what's the advantage of multi-site versus church planting? And I think they're both good models. I think there's pluses and minuses to both, and so that's there. But so Orchard Hill really got into the idea when, honestly, part of it was when I came, we were overstaffed in worship arts. Just that was our reality. We had too many people. And
That's a nice problem to have.
Right?
Well, it is, and it's not where we are today. And so there was a piece of me that said, okay, do we let somebody go? And it was, well, what if we use the staff we have and start another campus and start that process? And so that was kind of what led us to say, and then we prayed about and said, let's approach what is now the Strip District. That was part of our journey. And just saying we had some people, resources to be able to launch. Right. And that is another one of the advantages. I think when a church is tied, there are resources, and I'm not just thinking money, although there is some of that, but there are things like your video department, your music, your accounting, like all of that stuff. You have one service center. Whereas otherwise each individual church has to figure out how to do all of those things themselves. And so we're able to have one system, which in theory is supposed to be more efficient. I don't know if it actually is, or if it just exponentially everything multiplies just like it would any other way. There are efficiencies in reality, but at times you ask that question, like did we just add another accounting person that would have been a half-time accounting person over here or there, that kind of thing. But so,
Dan, Brady gave us a brief history of the Strip District. Of the Butler campus? Do you mind giving us a brief history, and maybe that can help us also talk about the pathway that we have now? I'm sure that helps sculpt what we do now at Orchard Hill.
Yeah, so I wasn't around for the beginning of it, but 2013, I believe, was the launch of the Cultural District. Orchard Hill started at the August Wilson Center in town, and then bounced around to the William Penn Hotel and some other meeting locations before the building that we're in now was bought in 2017, renovated, and opened first service in May of 2019, which it was the old altar bar on Penn Avenue. So now it was an old Catholic church. So we moved it. Yeah, as services started in May 2019, COVID hit, and then it kind of became a relaunch after COVID, from my understanding. And then I arrived in March of 22. So almost 3 years now. But the building is it's beautiful. It's right in the heart of the Strip District. So obviously a growing area in Pittsburgh, tons of people, tons of businesses down there now. It's got a real neighborhood feel to it down there these days. So that's kind of the brief history of it.
Yeah. So how did both of these campuses forming kind of help leadership decide how we do this moving forward? Like I know we have kind of a formula, for lack of better words.
Yeah, so in both cases, we probably invested a fair amount to make the campuses happen. And that's good, and we want to keep that option open. When we started what is now Bridgeville, we kind of said, let's try to do it more organically. Let's see if we can gather more people before we invest a lot. I don't know if that's working as well as we had hoped either. And so, Bridgeville's healthy. It's a good option right now, but it's taken a long time with the more slow organic approach. And so I think we're relooking at that a little bit. I mean, overall, our campus pathway, what I'd say is we're committed to doing campuses. We'd love to see 10 campuses around Pittsburgh that are Orchard Hill. We'd love to see what Butler and the Strip have become be the model of what the campuses are, which is what we say, about a 500-person capable campus. Meaning what we'd like to see is that each location can handle 500 people on a Sunday. In order to serve for the worship capacity, overall worship kids, ministry together. So that's kind of what we're doing. Somebody asked me the other day, well, why that number? Like what is it in that? And the answer is there's an economic reality to that you have enough people to give and provide services. It's a nice size. People enjoy that size church because you can kind of know people. Your real estate makes sense. Like when you start getting bigger, your real estate just gets harder and harder to acquire and do. And it's a good size from connecting to the whole, because at 400 or 500 people, you're a significant church, but you probably don't feel like you move the needle of the whole community. But if you're networked with the other churches that are part of Orchard Hill, then it's like, okay, we have our part, but we're also part of something bigger in terms of that. So those were some of the rationales. I mentioned the idea of why not just church plant? Like that's one of the things I've heard people, they've asked me, like why not just outright do a church? Like why would you make it a campus? And one of the things I have said that people don't often, they don't necessarily think about this, and that is there's actually more solidity with a church that's tied. So for example, in our Strip District location, we went through probably 4 pastoral transitions over the 10 years we've been there, which is not atypical in a small startup in terms of what would happen. And the solidity of Orchard Hill being part of that has helped it weather those transitions, those moves, all of that in a way. Now in Butler, Brady's been there from day one, so we've had a lot of stability, and so it's almost been the opposite experience. But we've seen the real benefit of that, and even doctrinally, what happens. So if you believe in doctrine being important, some of the things we believe, the way we do church. What happens in any church plant is sooner or later, if the pastor has been there a while, he or she leads the way they want to lead, and people just glom to whatever that is. And even your board, even great board, it's like, well, we're friends with, and this is good. And at Orchard Hill, there's a board that is really able to oversee and continue to promote the doctrine mission side of what we're trying to do. So I think that's an advantage in terms of that. But again, like I said, I mean, obviously church planting is a good thing as well.
Yeah, great.
I don't know, you guys have anything to add to that? What have you seen as advantages or disadvantages of multi-site versus church planting?
Yeah, I think in many ways you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The other thing, I don't care for the term brand, but Orchard Hill has pretty solid name recognition and a good reputation locally, and I think that helps as well. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of the mission, the ministries, the systems, even things like curriculum for kids and students to a large extent. And so there's more of an efficiency, so you can focus more on people and ultimately the mission.
Right.
So I think there's that backbone, and I think there's just having some success as a church. I've heard it said, and Kurt, maybe you can speak a little more to this, but if you don't have, sometimes churches start because they want to grow, but you really want to be in a very healthy place, not just numerically, but in order to plant, because that can have a really detrimental effect. So I think for me, it's like not reinventing the wheel. There's certain things that are already happening that are good things, and to have the opportunity to focus on people and the mission, I think that's one of the things that really helps.
When we bought the building in Butler, the pastor who had been there said this to me at the time, and it's one of those statements where you're like, I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting way to think about it. He said, church is a little bit like chicken business. I'm like, well, I don't know about that. But he said, here's the deal. He said, you, Orchard Hill, are like Chick-fil-A. It's like, well, okay, maybe, thank you, if you like Chick-fil-A. He said, I can make as good a chicken sandwich as Chick-fil-A and put out my shingle in Butler, and everybody comes in and they're like, I don't know if this place is any good because I've never heard of it. But because you're Chick-fil-A, you're going to come in here and do church, and your people are going to come because it's Chick-fil-A. And like I said, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I think to your point, there is something to, I've heard of this place. It has a long time reputation. It's supposed to be good. That gives credibility to the campuses in a way that may not exist if you just start like, hey, I'm just, Joe showing up and doing a church in Butler or in the Strip. And obviously sometimes a denomination will be behind that church, and there are things behind. But again, locally, like when you hear, the Southern Baptists are planning a church, it's like, well, who are the Southern Baptists, and are they any good anymore? I mean, like you have all those questions, and that doesn't mean anything. But when it's a local church, you have that, this church, I know people who go there, or I've heard of it, I understand it. So there is something to that too.
I think of the other big advantage, I've had a couple other friends who've done the campus pastor route at a church plant, and one of the things they've said to me is, it's just really hard to do everything. They feel like they're pulled in so many different directions because they don't have that support from a main campus. So that's always one of the things I'm really grateful for, is that I have support staff to lean on. I can, come to the main campus once or twice a week and meet with people and talk through ideas and see how they're doing it, in a different way that could fit our context in the Strip District. So the sharing of ideas is so important. The bigger staff, I think you can feel, I've been in smaller ministry settings where you can feel like you're on an island, like you're all by yourself. And so I think the multi-site model really lends to the team and the,
So what
building that
about
way.
video teaching? Because that's the other thing I hear from people. It's like, I don't want to go and watch a video.
Right.
So talk about how we do video and how that lives at the campuses for you guys, what you see as the pluses, what you see as the downsides.
And the balance of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that we do video at Orchard Hill, it feels like I'm, myself or David Bones will give a message from time to time at the Strip. It's one out of every three is kind of the rhythm, and then the other two are video from Wexford. Kurt is usually given the message, and I think what I hear from people that are there, that are watching it, that are seeing it, and we have a younger crowd at the Strip District, so I don't think the screen is foreign to them. I don't think getting media from online is foreign. So I really haven't heard much in the way of, this is a distraction or this is hard, because, I think because there's consistency, and the video speaker is Kurt, who they know, and Kurt's comes to the building a few times a year, and they can shake his hand and things like that. He's a real person. The consistency of it helps, and yeah, honestly, it's the way content is delivered nowadays and how people get podcasts and everything from all over the place. It really, when I walked into it, I thought, I wonder if this is going to be an issue people are upset about, and they wish there was more, live teaching. And I certainly think the live teaching they like, and they tell me that. Maybe they're just being nice, but I think the benefit of video is, again, not having to do all things all the time and being, like Brady, you said, more freed up for relationships and people and building teams.
Yeah, one of the things, and I'd love to hear your answer too, Brady, but that I know having pastored through kind of some different sizes is you hit a size where it's really hard, and it is in that 300 to 500, where all of a sudden you're supposed to be on to speak almost every week. You generally don't have a second person who is easily accessible to do that. You need to run all the groups, all the ministries, be at all the weddings, all the funerals. Like all of a sudden, it just becomes this, there's almost no way to do it. And so one of the things this does is it does allow our campus pastors to pastor as well as teach and not just feel like they're always on that burden. And the other thing that I have seen is that it does tie the churches together. I think if you were all live, then you really, whatever you call it, it's a lot more like a church plant because there isn't a consistency. Even though I think we're very consistent, like when I listen to you guys teach, and I've taught the same week, and I'm like, oh, that was great. There, you guys, it was because we're so textual. It's like, oh, it was the same message, and which is what you want ultimately. So I don't feel that, but I do still think there's something to, oh, okay, we all heard the same message that does tie you together. How have you experienced that, Brady?
Yeah, and I don't know if Craig Rochelle is a pastor of a very large church called Life Church TV, and you could speak to, I don't know if he takes credit for the first video teaching in multi-site in America.
But I've heard North Coast in California actually started before him.
Okay, well, he says that they kind of fell into video teaching on accident. He was, and I'm not sure the exact story, but he was supposed to be on, and he either got sick or got tired. He's like, I can't go, or his wife was pregnant. I don't remember the story. It's like, what are we going to do? And they had the bright idea, let's show the video from earlier, and it kind of worked. And so that was many years ago. And so they kind of fell on that on accident. I think the similar thing, that sometimes is an initial barrier for people like, with screen, where's the local pastor?
Right.
And so what I tell people in Butler, I think it's a little bit different than the Strip because little different context. And that's probably the one conversation I have repeatedly with new people. What I try and tell people, I say give it 4 weeks. What I mean by that is you get to see the rhythm. You'll hear me once, you see Kurt, you'll hear Kurt. I think Kurt said to me once, people ultimately want good teaching, and I think that's true. What happens if you're in Wexford often for people is they'll come and maybe 50% of them, rather than looking right at Kurt, are probably looking at the screen.
Yeah.
I'll look, like I'll be sitting right in front, and people be sitting right in front of me, and I'll be like, hey, I'm right here.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the side screen.
And to Dan's point, people are used to getting content that way, and so I say give it 4 weeks. It's not for everybody, but I think once people say, "Oh, I get this," and it's important for me to have pastoral presence. So even if I'm not on teaching, it's important for me to be connecting with people, pushing the mission forward each week. That it's not just it's not just message focused. And so I think that's true. I think people appreciate a rhythm. They do appreciate live teaching, and we're always trying to, hey, what's the best ratio? That's always a conversation.
And we're pretty unique, actually, because most multi-site lean very heavily toward all video or all live, and that's kind of the consensus wisdom is you should do one or the other. And so what we've done, there are other churches that do it the way we do it, where it's a rhythm. But our thought had been, it's okay because, again, to speak every week is such a demanding task, and yet to not speak at all, like some churches, like Life Church, it's 100% video. They might have one weekend a year that their local person speaks. And to me, that really undercuts the local pastor from being able to teach and lead if there's that little in terms of that. But that's definitely, like, their model is, okay, no, it's, and Groeschel now, I think he delivers it on Thursday night and doesn't even go to church on the weekend. It's like, I want to get to where he is. I'm kidding, kind of.
Can you both kind of speak to, I hear that there's a balance there, how that allows you to specifically in the local community reach out? Like I've seen you, Dan, have some great relationships in the Strip District with businesses and in Butler. You have some time to be that local pastor like we're speaking about, because there's a balance.
Yeah, I think just what you said. I mean, I think the time that you're freed up, that you're not maybe having to prepare for a message every week, week in, week out, allows me to meet with people, connect with people, walk around town, get to know other people I don't know yet. And in the Strip District, everything's right there. And so it's really, trust, having a message that I trust and teaching that I know is going to be solid allows me to point people towards that and point people away from it. And really, it shouldn't ever be about the pastor anyway. So it's not about who's up there, who's giving the message. It's about, who the word, and, can we rely on it and trust it, and what can we learn from it? So, it's a good model, I think. Yeah.
About you, Brady, any specific
Yeah,
things that you can
one
think
of the things I appreciate about the Orchard Hill model is we have some non-negotiables, things that, the mission is central, the leadership is central, but there's also some flexibility given the local community. And so let's say we have 4 or 5 drives each year, whether it be a food drive or the Giving Tree. We can localize that to something right in our backyard in Butler, and people really feel the need and desire to want to do something locally. Look, like, it's great to make a difference in Haiti. It's great that whatever's Wexford's doing, or the Strip District, but we also want to have what's happening in our backyard. And one of the ways we've seen this play out is in our Elios ministry, which is our mercy ministry. And we've, for the last almost 3 years now, been a part of food distribution in Butler. So we get to have once a month, the last Saturday of the month, basically in our parking lot. We work with the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank. We get boxes of food, we get some produce, and there's a ministry happening, not just on that Saturday, which takes a lot of people to be involved, but that's throughout the whole month. There's midweek packing. All that to say, that's a way that we can do the mercy ministry of Orchard Hill, but in a very local context. And I think that's one of the nice things about our model as well.
We've talked about this more. I wanted to give us the opportunity to maybe think about some more examples. Some critics argue that multi-campus sites feel impersonal or too centralized, and we've already talked about some ways that we balance that out. Do you think of other ways that we make sure that that's not too much of an issue on our campuses?
I think for me, the personal part is the people. A pastor once told me, this always sticks with me, if you want someone to stick at a church, you got to give them a friend and a job. And you can love the teaching, you can even love the pastor per se, you can love the ministries for the kids, like, that's all good, but at some point, if you don't feel like there's a connection with community, and you don't feel like you're on, and you might not even use these words, but if you don't feel like you're on a greater mission than yourself, you're probably not going to stick. I read an article the other day by Carey Nieuwhof, who speaks a lot progressively about churches and so forth, and he said the future of the church really is pretty soon, almost during COVID, people have been much less engaged in church attendance. He said the future, and the future is now, is that almost only the engaged are going to come. So it's less and less, I'm going to sit on the sideline for 6 months and check it out. Pretty soon, if you don't have that community. So the impersonal piece, I think any church struggles with that. And so it's really my role, my team's role, to make those connections happen. And so a church will be impersonal, whether it's multi-site, a church plant, a big church, a small church, if there's not connection and community being tied to the larger mission.
One of the things I saw, so my pastoral journey was I went as a solo pastor to a small church in Michigan, right out of seminary. And when the church started to grow, we got to 100, 150, and it was personal, easy. Like, everyone could see everybody and connect. about 200 people would come in and go out and could start feeling impersonal. And to Brady's point, we started to have to build systems and work harder to make sure people felt connected,
Right.
or we ran into that very problem. And so it is a problem, bigger problem at a bigger church, no question about it. But it's a problem in any church that gets to 150 to 200 people, that somebody can come in and go out for 3-4 weeks and feel like hardly anyone talked to me. Somebody may have said hello, but I didn't get a job, I didn't make a friend, I didn't start to connect. And so any size church needs that intention in order to continue to help people want to be a part of a church connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I've almost seen the strong benefit of being a site, a multi-site, as far as being able to make it personal for people, because as the campus pastor, I'm not tied to giving the message each and every week. I have more availability on Sunday to not only connect with people that are coming in, but make sure that the team of volunteers that we have that are tasked with kind of making people feel welcome and helping make connections know, they can come approach me and they can find, we can have a conversation about what people are thinking about. So I think that's a huge benefit of multi-site, is being able to make those connections and make, even as we've grown to 300 plus people at the Strip, we can still find people easily that aren't connected, that have been coming for a while, and that we talk about every week in our staff times, who are the people that, that we have seen recently that maybe we can help get connected or help, in a group or to serve or something like that. So,
Yeah. Let's talk about the future a little bit. Where do we see multi-site campuses in general over the next decade? What do we think that looks like? Not specifically Orchard Hill, but
What do you guys think?
next decade, what year
Yeah.
are we talking about? 2000 flying. We'll be flying the church. Yeah. No, I think it's again, with the increase in people are comfortable with video teaching and different ways. I think there's going to be a real need for it. Need for a churches that are doing it well to reproduce and move into different parts of cities. As I walk past old churches that seem to be closing down, I think there's definitely no shortage of people, and this would be great if there was churches that are revitalized and revamped and drawing people in. So I would hope that the direction would be, more and more people are understanding and the benefit of a model like a multi-site, and the vision of being able to reach more people in different communities that, not everyone wants to drive 45 minutes to get to a church. So how do we put churches in people's backyard and become accessible? As the early church moved around in the book of Acts, they were accessible in different communities, in different pockets, in different houses, and that's how it grew. So.
I think the future, maybe it's already here, but it in some ways, one of the things that Orchard Hill has is a great Christmas tradition, and so thousands and 14,000 plus will come to Orchard Hill. That's a beautiful thing. I think though the future is, and I think of the neighborhood right by the Butler campus, the people are not going to come into the building. That's such a huge barrier. And I'm talking about the unchurched in particular. So I think the future of the church is if you build it, they will come. Sometimes, and we hope that we have things like that and outreach focus. But I think the future is going to have to be go get them, engage them on their level, build community out there to build steps to coming into, again, church is not the building. But I think the future of the church in general, at least in North America, probably is going to be more and more. They're not coming in. They may not even be seeking. They're seeking community, maybe not with a church. And so how do we meet people where they are in the community first? So to me, the future is going to be really forward thinking about that piece of it in terms of, reaching people.
yeah.
So, and my perspective, and a little older, is that has been the church for the last 10, 15 years. Like, I don't think that's new, in that we are post-Christian as a society at this point. And so there's a couple natural times when people still move toward the church. Christmas, weddings, funerals, babies. Those are times when people all of a sudden say, you know what, maybe we should go to church again or try something. And so what we've seen in our Wexford campus is our growth year after year is often in the late 20s, early 30-year-olds who are starting to have kids. Because they went away from church in college, if they had church at all, and then all of a sudden they have kids and they say, I think I want something for my kids. That's an inroad time, and it's part of why we make kids ministry so important. You obviously work with kids ministry in the Strip because people care about what happens with their kids. And in this day of video, rightly people say, well, I don't even have to go to church to get the teaching. I can click and I can get something I want today. Like if I don't want whatever you're serving up, I can find something I want and listen to it. And so church as a consumer good, saying, oh, I'm going here because I like what they're doing, has been on a sharp decline for a long time. It's much more about community, mission, all those things. And I think what you're going to see, my take, and I've been saying this for a while, and it hasn't moved quickly in this direction, but I think it's coming still, is I think you're going to see a polarization in terms of size. With church, I think you're going to see really big and you're going to see really small. Okay. And what I mean by that is I think people are going to generally say either want to be part of multi-site, big church, and you're going to see even a nationalization at times or a regionalization where big churches start coming into littler areas saying, we're putting a church here. Like Hillsong was an example. They were trying that before they kind of had their blow-up meltdown. But they were trying to put a Hillsong in every big city. And I think you're going to see that kind of a nationalization at some point and regionalization where there will be regional players, national players. And then you're going to see the 100-person, we want the most organic, non-big, non-splashy, non-anything small church. And in a sense, what I think multi-site in a setting like Orchard Hill has is a little bit of both, because you have a little bit of the organic in the campuses, feels like, hey, this is a true community, but yet we're still tied to something bigger. But I think you're going to see that. Not that there won't be mid-sized churches, but I think people will tend to gravitate more to one or the other.
Yeah.
I've heard it said, an old pastor say, there are 3 times when everybody comes to church: when they're hatched, matched, and dispatched. The first time they throw water, the second time they throw rice, the third time they throw dirt. So those are still the 3 times, people with baptism early on, marriage, as you said, and funerals.
Yeah.
And so can you take advantage of those natural times when people are open to the message? And look, the Holy Spirit of God is the same Holy Spirit who is on the same mission, who is still bringing people to Jesus, and He will until Jesus comes back. So the mission and Jesus is moving forward. How do we kind of get on board to what God's already doing? That'll be the strategy piece, I think.
Yeah. Great. What advice would you give as a senior pastor and as campus pastors to someone who might be thinking a church like, we want to take this first step in a multi-site? What would be some words of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I would say, again, I haven't been on it from the leadership decision to start a site, but just being in it as a campus pastor, I would make sure you have the right people and leadership people in place to go where you want to go. To is the community you're moving into is it because there's a building, or do you have people buy-in? Do you have people that are excited about, you're coming to my community, I want to help grow this. I know the neighborhoods, I know the people here, I know how to reach the community. So making sure you have that infrastructure first before maybe blindly just saying we're gonna go for it.
Yeah.
But
I thought you meant, what would you say to someone who's like, should I be a part of a multi-site church? So I don't know if that's what you were talking.
No,
that's where my mind was going.
No, well, you can answer that as well. I mean, if you're a church watching this right now and you're thinking, this might be the direction we'd like to go, what advice would you give to someone who is in the role of maybe going to be their campus pastor?
Yeah, I think what Dan said is really helpful. I think if you feel like you're in a really healthy place, you have a good DNA, you have good systems in place where you are that are easily expandable, good leadership in place, I think that's huge. And not to get too churchy, but you really got to rely on praying and having God's insight. It's one thing to say, we should go plant our flag here, But without the spiritual process of listening, of prayer, of conversations with people, I really think it's important to do your homework. One of the reasons why we ended up in Butler, at the time I think County was around 180,000 people, and just doing a little bit of data research, we found that at least 77,000 people were unchurched. Meaning, if every good church and every bad church in Butler were filled to capacity, there still is not enough room for all those who were admittedly unchurched. And so I think you really want to have discernment as to the where. Is it an unchurched area? Is it a churched area? Who's in the background? Rather than saying, I think this would be good to plant our flag. I think there's a lot of prayer, discernment, data, talking to people on the ground before you kind of move the ball.
Yeah, definitely I'd say let it be a spiritual process, not a trend or this is what churches should do. Meaning you want to be called to it. It is not easy. And so I would say, it's something definitely you want to say this is a spiritual process, and you really need to bring the commitment of church planting to it, or you will be, unless you're just in a high growth area, and Pittsburgh kind of has one right now in one or two areas, but by and large, we're not a high growth city. Like in some areas, you put a church and all these neighborhoods grow up around it, and they're like, oh, we're going to do another site over here. Pittsburgh's not that. So definitely praying and feeling called, not just a trend. And I would say have a long range plan, meaning what is your end game with it? Is it that you're going to spin off churches eventually, or is it going to be a continued model? Maybe you don't know that right away, but what is the plan? I had somebody say to me a while back, I have 4 boys, and they're old enough now that they all drive. And so at one point I had 6 cars that I was taking care of between my wife's car, my car, and the 4. And I had somebody say to me, because they had just asked me something, I said, I got all these cars, I got all these appointments, and he was like, that is what it is to add campuses to our life, right? So if you feel like having 2 cars is a lot, adding another one, it's not that by itself it is, but when you say, at least from a senior pastor standpoint, it's like, oh, wow, okay, it's just, I don't just have 2 appointments to go get the oil changed. I have 6.
Yeah.
Now I pushed it to my kids and worked out. Now I don't have 6 cars, but I think there is something to that. And so sometimes people think more is better, and I don't know that more is better. I think quality is better. And when you're ready to have another step, great. But if you have some big master plan that's like, we're doing this many, like even when I say, well, we hope to do 10 someday, we may not. And I'm okay with that, because I don't want to ever be in a place where it's like, we have to do this, rather than saying, how's the Spirit moving? What can we actually do with quality along the way, rather than just, hey, we have this big master plan. That's kind of our dream. And we say we think it's God-given, but we're holding it loosely, because it may be that God has a different dream, and that's emerged over time.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all. I think, a little bias here, but I think you both as campus pastors do a wonderful job, leadership and senior pastor, with that balance of multi-site campuses, and really appreciate everything we do here at Orchard Hill. So thank you all for joining us here today. We've got some great content on Orchard Hill Plus. Hope to see you soon.